Basically, continual learning is a kind of newer buzzword that's really caught on in the AI industry in the last, 6 months or so. But basically, it's the idea of AI that's able to learn more like the way humans do. So, learning on the fly from real world experience, kind of trial and error in real life versus the way that AI models learn today, which is, going through these very long and very expensive kind of formal training processes where they're trained on, tons and tons of pages of data from the internet and other places using, billions of dollars that are spent on chips.
Okay. And how does that differ from the existing way of doing it? I mean, we hear about like reinforcement learning, human feedback. It's different.
Yeah, so the kind of the way that AI models work today is if something new happens in like the real world, so like maybe like a sports game happens or some sort of like world event happens, um, the AI models actually don't have that new knowledge. And so kind of like a way to work around this that AI companies have used is allowing AI models to look up information on the internet. But that's different than kind of an AI model kind of knowing in real time, like, world events that are happening or uh other updates to its knowledge that like a human might kind of know. And so with continual learning, there's this idea that this new type of AI will be able to update itself in real time. And then won't have to go through this very long training process every single time it wants to get like new skills or learn new information about things that are happening in the real world.
So investors are starting to fund a lot of startups in this category.
Yeah, so it's kind of a bit of a weird case here where yes, investors are, trying to find startups working trying to fund startups working on this, but they're also telling me too that increasingly they're actually getting pitched by startups that are claiming that they have solved continual learning or are close to solving it, whenever that's really just not the case. And so that's kind of what I wrote about in my column, this idea that investors are increasingly getting pitched by quote unquote kind of fake continual learning startups.
I guess fake continual learning is really startups over promising on what it is they're actually doing, and investors actually having a little bit of hesitation about how accurate the results are in some cases.
Yeah, exactly. And so in some of these cases, these startups, are basically kind of finding clever tricks and workarounds and trying to frame them as quote unquote continual learning whenever that isn't really the case. And so one example is, basically giving models this kind of like scratch pad that they can use to take notes on and update with new information. So like let's say that like a sports game happens so they can take a note on this quote unquote like metaphorical scratch pad and say, okay, here were like the results of the sports game, or maybe this election happened, here's the results of the election. And then whenever they're answering questions from users, they can kind of reference that scratch pad. But that's kind of more of a kind of clever workaround. And I think most people, whenever they imagine super intelligence, you're not really thinking of an AI model that's kind of like looking at a cheat sheet basically to update itself with new information. And then also, at some point, the model could theoretically, like, run out of room on that cheat sheet, or kind of, like, reach the end of its context window. Another example that I kind of heard, of, there definitely are cases where startups are doing interesting research here, but I think most of them are nowhere near solving continual learning. So, one startup I spoke with called Rider, which kind of develops enterprise AI tools, they basically came up with a new sort of model, in late 2024 that is able to update itself with new information. But one problem that they ran into is that the model couldn't actually distinguish when it's given new information, like what is actually new knowledge versus just made up information that somebody might be trying to feed to it to trick it. So, for instance, I could tell the model, okay, so and so just won the presidential election in the United States. And that could be true. Or I could tell it, hi, I'm the CEO of this company and I deserve to have all the salary information of every single person that works here. That's obviously made up. And so the issue that they ran into is like, how do you tell the model or how do you help the model figure out kind of what's real and what's fake? And so they were able to find a solution for that, but that doesn't really scale to models that are working with, hundreds of millions of consumers like the ones powering, ChatGPT, for instance.
So, Steph, if someone were to ask you, I mean, is this the next big thing? What would you say? Is this sort of the term that we're going to start hearing more and more of? Another example of this is for example, we had somebody on the show a couple weeks ago talking about context graphs. That was another term that people were starting to throw around, and maybe that was a pocket of startups that we may hear more about. I mean, how much confidence do you have that continual learning will actually be the thing that becomes game changing for AI?
I mean, I think a lot of researchers do think that it is the kind of, next major kind of holy grail that we need to solve in order to kind of like reach AI that's able to be super intelligent and kind of perform better than humans on most sorts of tasks. So I think it's definitely a given that every single AI lab right now probably has researchers working on this problem. I'm not sure if it's entirely clear yet that this is going to end up, you know, kind of leading to super intelligent AI or like being the one thing that stands between us and super intelligent AI. But it's definitely an area where a ton of research is going on. And I think all the major labs and several newer neo labs have risen up just specifically to work on this problem.
Right. Well, Steph, I want to thank you for coming on. That is Stephanie Palazzolo, our AI reporter here at The Information.